Yeah, could somebody drop us a line in the chat if you, yes, brilliant, thank you. I'm sorry about that, we had a restart issue. So thank you very much. I'm very pleased to introduce Sara Walker, who is going to tell us about the panel. Go ahead.
Great, thanks very much everybody for joining us today and with my fellow panelists. So we have an opportunity to hear some different reflections as part of the panel. I have got some prepared questions for the panel, but we will open it out to the floor as well in case there's any questions that colleagues would like to ask moving forward. So we're going to start with a brief introduction from each panel member. I'll start just by saying hello myself. So my name is Sara Walker. I work at the University of Birmingham. Welcome to our extended campus here at the Exchange. And I am involved in a research project called HIACT on hydrogen, a research project called EDRC on energy demand reduction, and a project called Super Air on AI for renewable energy. So I do quite a bit of energy related research and have always had an interest in equality, diversity and inclusion as part of that. I'll hand over in this direction. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, so my name's Sam Williamson. I'm an Associate Professor of Equitable Energy Systems at the University of Bristol. I've been working in energy for about 16 years. Before that, I worked in the aerospace industry in Bristol. Currently, I'm working on a couple of projects. So I work with the Supergen Energy Networks Hub. I represent I lead the ECR forum there and try and support the ECR community. And I came up into that role through being part of that ECR community and working with the hub. And then I was invited to be a co-I as the hub got renewed. I also very luckily now lead a project called SHINE, which is the Sustainable Holistic Inclusive Energy, I should know this, Inclusive Energy Systems for Wellbeing. It's a project working with partners across eight different countries, so UK, Ghana, Gambia, South Africa, Nepal, 6 different countries, and Brazil, looking at how we can actually anchor well-being at the center of energy system design and think about how that really drives it. And so, yeah, I'm really keen. I'm very passionate about energy. I'm very passionate about actually having a diverse input into energy systems because everybody uses energy. That's sort of the key thing. We're all there. We all use it. It needs to be. We need to have the right people in the room. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Over to Marco.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marco Reggiani. I'm a researcher at the University of Strathclyde. I've been working in UK higher education for around 6 years. I do a lot of different things, but most of my work focuses on inclusion in STEM. So I've worked on many different projects. I started with the one called STEM Equals that was funded by EPSRC under the Inclusion Matters Call. So there we were looking at the experiences mainly of women and queer people in STEM. I collaborate with Ignite, where instead we are looking with intersectional lenses at the experiences of underrepresented people in energy research. I've led or co-led a lot of different projects specifically focused on the experiences of queer people. And more recently, I'm also collaborating at Collaborative Cultures, which is a project that is funded by the Wellcome Trust at the University of Strathclyde, looking at the ways we recognize and reward people working in higher education. So my focus has been mainly in higher education.
Thank you. And over to Natalia.
Hello. Oh, it worked. Good. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalia. Really nice to see everyone in the room, and hi to everyone online as well that has joined. I am a research associate at Newcastle University in energy systems. My research mainly focuses on resilience and climate resilience. I look at it from 2 different perspectives, from quantification perspective. And recently, during a secondment, I did that Ofgem, the energy regulator, from a regulatory perspective. I work in the EPSRC Supergen Energy Networks Hub, and I'm also involved in other activities parallel to that. And very excited to be here today, actually, talk about EDI in our work environment in energy, because I think energy is on itself EDI, to be honest. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'm really excited about today.
Great, thank you. So now we know our panelists a little bit. I'll refer you to the title of our discussion panel, which is about building inclusive research cultures. So I'm going to ask the panel, first of all, what does an inclusive research culture look like in the context of energy research? And if that's a difficult question, then maybe also what does it not look like as an alternative way of answering that question? I'll maybe go to Marco first.
Yeah, it's indeed a very difficult question. And I think we have heard some ideas today already around how an inclusive space looks like, and that resonates with my own definition. I think in very broad terms, an inclusive research environment is an environment where everybody can thrive and where people feel that they can bring their whole self to work without fear of repercussion. So it seems a very kind of short, all-encompassing definition that is easy to understand, but to reach or to create this kind of environment is not easy at all, because there are so many dimensions we have to think about when you think about inclusivity. And I'm just gonna mention some of them on the top of my mind, because there are too many to list all of them. So we need to look at opportunities. First of all, we need to understand how opportunities are distributed. Is everybody having the same access to promotion, authorship, opportunities to travel, opportunities to collaborate? Then we have to, I think somebody mentioned before, about we need to become aware and very attentive about who's in the room and who's not in the room. So this is very much related to diversity. And diversity is not just about head counts, it's also about are we seeing, recognizing, but also valuing the different backgrounds, the different experiences that people bring in the room. So do these different people that we have brought in our research teams, in our research environment, do they have a voice? Are they empowered? Do they feel like they belong here? So being inclusive needs to be attentive and to be intentional about the choices that we make, so that we are removing all these kind of barriers. And I will stop here because I'm sure that the other panelists have other ideas to add here.
Great, thank you. Natalia, I'll maybe go to you next.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's indeed a difficult one to answer. I think maybe I can think of from my personal perspective, because obviously I'm not a social scientist, so I think I would talk more about how I feel about. I think is when you feel natural where you are, no matter who you are. I think I would say, as a person, I think that's when, in my opinion at least, I think you can say it's an inclusive environment when you don't have to feel different, because it's okay the way you are, from a human perspective. And maybe also, I think, as it was touched upon right now, from a discipline perspective as well, obviously, that, and I think we heard it in the morning today, that being in energy, it's not only if you're an engineer, you can work in energy. Obviously, it's a multifaceted area. And it's important to understand that since you deliver it for so many people, it does have very many aspects to it, which I think makes it challenging. But in my opinion, it's the beauty of it as well. So I would say from these perspectives, I think it's important to, in my opinion at least, it's when you feel you're in an inclusive environment.
Great, thanks. What about you, Sam?
I think I'm going to have to echo everything that I've heard, because and they put it much more beautifully than I can. I think for me, think about an inclusive culture in energy as well. It is bringing yourself, and I find it hard to bring myself sometimes, because I don't necessarily feel I belong always. was telling somebody earlier, I came to Bristol, very much like Neha. I came to Bristol, but I came to Bristol over 20 years ago to study undergrad, or to think about an undergraduate course. I sat in a room as a working class child with a load of public school kids, and I did not feel I belonged. And that, I don't want anyone to ever feel like that. And it doesn't matter how you feel, don't feel included within that thing. And so when we're creating our research, when we're creating our work, when we're teaching, when we're doing anything, we need to make sure that everybody knows that they belong through the words that we say, that the actions that we take. And I think that that's really important. And through the projects that I've worked with, I work with amazing researchers across the world, amazing academics across the world, and trying to work out how to include them properly. And I think I'm not perfect. I'm definitely not perfect. But listening, having that open feedback, having that atmosphere where you can say, actually, do you know what? I want to call you out. You said something wrong. You're creating that atmosphere. So having that opportunity, I think, is really important, and having that space where, as you're saying, Marco, everybody's voice is valued, that you can bring yourself, that you can bring all of the, Naya was talking about the intersectionality as well, that all those things that you have is really important. And so I think, yeah, I can't add to anything else, but I definitely emphasize those.
Great. Okay, so it sounds like we feel that an inclusive research culture enables us to bring our authentic selves to our work environment, that we value contributions across different protected characteristics, but also across class, across discipline, and recognizing intersectionality, and also that we need to be aware of who is in the room, but also who is not in the room, I think was a really interesting point in terms of trying to improve research culture. And I think that final point around not being perfect, but trying to improve is also really important, because sometimes we don't do anything for fear of doing it wrong. My next question, I'll come to Sam first so that you get the first bite of the cherry, is why is this relevant at all for innovation and impact in the field of energy research? Why is it inclusivity relevant?
I think for me, the answer is that we're not getting it right, or we don't get it right without being inclusive. We have these, we've created these systemic barriers, these cultural and these societal barriers, and they drive people away. But when we're doing energy research, as has been mentioned, it's for everybody. You know, everybody uses energy. Everybody has that. It's a need and a use in our lives. And so if we haven't got the right people in the room, if we haven't got those right voices at the table, then we cannot make that impactful research that we want to do. And that, for me, is the key thing. That's where the innovation comes from. A lot of the ideas and a lot of the things that I've been working on over the last few years have been from, I say again, amazing researchers who actually, in our academic structures, do not have the voices that they want to have. They cannot get journal publications going through because their English isn't quite perfect enough. They cannot get grant publications through because they need an international researcher going through. All of these things are systemic things that stop this amazing innovation happening, and that knowledge getting out there, and that knowledge being developed and supported. And so I think that's why inclusion and inclusivity is so important.
Thank you. Natalia, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that was really nice, Sam. Yeah, and I think the other thing, the other perspective I would add definitely to Sam is as well, not only give the opportunity, but I also think in why not explore other ideas? So, if you actually block someone, because in theory, right, what we're trying to do and in practice is solve problems. So if you block some ideas, but if you're blocking people, it's as if you're blocking some ideas. Why would you do that then? So in my opinion, even if you see it from a more practical perspective, I think it's very important to have an inclusive and diverse environment, because I think that then that is in my opinion, the way to really explore the full opportunity that we have as society, as scientific society, as people. I think it's important for that reason as well. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Marco.
Yeah, definitely agree with what has been said, and I just want to reinforce that inclusion is not something that is not something that our institutions are doing to us as a favor. There are moral obligations, so hopefully we are here and we agree that this is an important thing to do. There's a justice theme. There are legal implications. Our organization, we have legal obligation to treat people fairly and to avoid discrimination. And as the other panelists were saying, diversity and inclusion is demonstrated by research that these produce better research, produce better kind of more innovation, and that when people, as Sarah was saying, when people feel that they can bring their authentic self to work if they want to, nobody should be forced to disclose anything about their identity if they don't want to. But if you can do that, then you're going to be more productive in your work and you're going to achieve more.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've got some thoughts there that overlap with some of the other questions that I'm going to ask. So I'll maybe not go to everybody for each question now, but maybe ask people if they'd like to say something. So if we're thinking about barriers to inclusive research environments, then what would you say is one of the biggest barriers that you yourself have experienced in your research experience so far, the biggest barrier from an inclusive research environment perspective? Natalia, maybe you could address this.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think I would take it. I think I would see it in my opinion, and maybe I'll talk about it a bit later, but that's okay. I think it's earlier in your career that you find barriers, in my opinion. And so I think that it is the fact that maybe you feel like an imposter yet, maybe. I think that that's a barrier there, because you feel, do you really belong yet? Do you really not? So I think maybe this feeling of not belonging yet, especially if you're doing a job in energy research that traditionally does not fit your likes, the way you are, whatever that means. I think that, in my opinion, the biggest barriers are in the beginning, because you're still trying to prove yourself and others as well. And this can start even young, from school years as well, not only university. In my opinion, I think that that's a stage. So if I can bring it basically to the table, it's not only a thing about now as a professional, but it's also how do you get there. So I think that that initial stage, in my opinion, is the more difficult one, in terms of feeling included, feeling part of whatever that is. And then basically, this is important because this will help you to explore the potential that you have afterwards. So I think it's also a crucial period of time at the same time that is a difficult, that has that barrier. Yeah, that, in my opinion, this is a key barrier.
Okay. Sam, Marco, anyone want to add to that?
I mean, there's so many challenges that exist when it comes to creative inclusivity, and I explore many of them through my research. I'm not going to talk in detail about this today, but I am going to talk a little bit more at a bigger challenge that I often encounter because of my specific work. I work in STEM. So often when I deliver talks, when I do training, when I talk with colleagues, there's this feeling as if this conversation doesn't belong to these spaces. There's this still very prevalent and fixed mindset that EDI, inclusivity, justice, these are topics that we don't need to care about, because we are here to do our STEM research, we are here to do our experiments, we are here to perform our role as a researcher. Why do we care about identity? But then I start to engage with them and showing, first of all, that there's a lot of privilege that is kind of comes to the table if you're able to say something like this, that your identity doesn't matter at all to the work that you do. But also that we should start to interrogate more critically. What does it mean? Who's an ideal? Who's a researcher? what is the kind of work that we are supposed to be doing? We were talking about that at one of the previous tables. You know, there's still a lot of biases and assumptions that our institution, our colleagues make about who's an ideal scientist, who's an ideal researcher. And often these kind of reflect certain kind of entrenched narratives and stereotypes that are built around white middle-class men that are able to travel around the clock, who don't have caring responsibility, that are able to work all the time. But this, of course, disadvantages a lot of people. So sometimes, you know, I come to the room with a very advanced and specific perspective, but I realize that there's a massive amount of work that is foundational to the conversation that we still have to do.
Sam, you'd mentioned something around systemic issues affecting participation and representation in energy research. Could you maybe say a little bit more about some of those systemic structural issues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk maybe from an ECR perspective, because that's, I guess, one of my own personal experiences as well. And so, and from what I hear and talk with the committee and the ECR committee within Supergen Energy Networks Hub. And I think one of the challenges is, as we all know, fixed term contracts, precarious contracts. How can you plan a life when you're on something like that? I still remember trying to get a mortgage on a fixed term contract. And they said, what happens if you lost your job? And I said, I'll get another one. And I was on the phone, and so I couldn't see the lady's face, but I'm imagining she was like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. My wife was also on a fixed term contract at the same time. And so we were like, you know, how are we going to get this? No bank would touch us. And so I think there are systems forcing researchers who have spent 7-8 years of their lives in education, pushing the edges of knowledge, to then go on to fixed term contracts where you have no guarantee about what's going on, you know, and you might be on 12 months, you might be on 24 months, whatever else. That, I think, is a huge challenge. And I think that we don't address that. You know, universities are talking about it. There's a lot to talk about, but actually, you know, my contract was better than a lot of my friends who were on permanent contracts, because they had 1 month's notice. I had at least 3 months' notice, I think, by the you know, so I would have time to go and find another job. But when you're on your fixed term contracts, you know, by the last year, you are looking for a job, and you will drop out of your project if you found another job that will keep you going for longer. Therefore, you don't get your outputs from the project you're working on because you've missed those last, say, 6 months of that project. You don't get the benefits from that, and you can't move on. And so I think those are some of the big challenges. And I think thinking about how we can support early career researchers with their own funding, with their be able to get universities to actually have open-ended contracts for researchers and be able to move them on, not have to apply for going from a fixed-term lecturing position to a full-time lecturing position, which I had to do at Bristol as well, and it really annoyed me. Those sort of things I think are really important for people to have certainty in their lives, because actually you want certainty through your job, because all of the other aspects of your life are completely uncertain. And so having that as much certainty as possible is really useful. And having that, and you work so much better. You just work so much better. You know that you don't have to think about this next thing that's coming along. And so, yeah, I think for me, that's sort of, let's say, from talking to the ECRs, that's one of the key things.
Fabulous, lots of food for thought there. So we've, on that topic of barriers and challenges, then we've got this issue around precarity of fixed term contracts, which is a systemic issue that impacts on the quality of research, teaching, professional life, but also personal life. We had that comment as well around this feeling that EDI is a separate topic to STEM, and those perhaps with some level of privilege are able to feel that their identity doesn't matter in their work. And then this idea that at the early stage of career, you're still finding your sense of belonging, and that that can lead to issues like imposter syndrome Although I don't think it matters when you are in your career, you still get imposter syndrome. Sorry, Natalia. So I'll move on then to a slightly different topic and talk about practical strategies. So some thoughts here then about what we might do better to engage the research community and better enable inclusive research. So Marco, maybe I can ask you to have a go at this and then see if others want to jump in.
I mean, that's a very complicated question as well. And I think engagement is really important, but how we engage is key here. You know, like I've been working in this space for 6 years. So you can imagine how many conversations I've joined discussing inequalities around race, around sexuality, around all sorts of things. People come to your conversation, maybe it's the first time they join a talk like this, and they are very motivated, they have high expectation, they want to change the world. Then they go away and nothing changes. They come back to the next conversation, oh well, nothing has changed, and then suddenly they start to disengage. So I think that one of the things that we need to do in, you know, how to have better engagement is that we should kind of match engagement with action and accountability. You know, like we are talking about all these challenges, we have explored different ways we can address things. Apart from a very nice discussion, will we go away from today with some actions? And will we be accountable for these actions the next time we meet each other? So I think that that's probably a starting point of how we can better engage with people and sustain that engagement over time.
Oh, that's no small challenge to the room, that this engagement event should follow with some action and accountability. Does anyone else want to comment on this question around engaging with research communities?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the challenges I've seen is funding bodies as well actually treating EDI as actually important. And I don't mean that in a very swathing, rude way. But what I have found is in a lot of, or in some of the funding applications that we've put in and the work that we've done, it's a bit of a tick box. You have to write, for example, in the energy catalyst, that's actually the new one's just come out. For Innovate UK, you have to write a JESI statement. But that JESI statement is not scored. That JESI statement does not count to your final sort of score for your thing. So you don't put much effort into it, but they want to know about it, and then they will evaluate you against it as you go through your project. But actually, it doesn't feel like it counts for very much at all. And so if we can get funding bodies to be able to, I guess, with a stick, effectively, use us to actually engage with that process more, think about how we're going to include diversity inclusion into our projects more, how we engage with that. I think that, for me, is one important way. So yeah.
Thanks, Sam. And so just staying with that idea about funding bodies, what do you think funding bodies and other institutions could do to incentivize inclusive practice? You've mentioned maybe embedding it more in the proposal and then follow on kind of project activity. But Marco, do you have any thoughts on this, on ways in which funding bodies might provide a bit more of a carrot or stick?
You know, we have been talking about this for so long, and all the time I very much agree with Sam, and I always say the same thing. You know, we want to see funders, we want to see institutions taking this seriously. What does that mean? Maybe is starting to reward people that actually are doing work in this space, who are making efforts on the top of their jobs to create more inclusive research environments that at the end of the day, they don't benefit just themselves, but they benefit the whole organization. And if you look around in your department, you know who are the people that are doing this kind of work around inclusivity. And you know full well also who are the people that don't engage at all, or the people that are obstacles to this work. So if you know that, it means that your organization, your head of department, your dean probably knows as well. So there's no reason why we are not in a position to reward the people that are doing the good work. Or as Sam was mentioning, it's quite baffling that this particular funding call is requiring you to produce maybe 500 words around EDI, other 500 words around responsible research and innovation, and then this doesn't count. Why am I putting in all this effort if it doesn't matter? So, and this also sends very wrong signals here, that you don't care. So maybe people that still care are going to do a nice job and put in a nice statement and follow up with accountability. But there's going to be a lot of other people that are like, well, why should I even bother?
Great. Any other thoughts, Natalia, on practical strategies to ensure diverse voices are heard in research groups, or to better engage across research communities?
I was thinking also on the funding as well, or on the, when you get a project or when you're in a team. So I will answer holistically a bit. I think it is indeed very difficult, because I guess the point is that this needs to be part of daily work. Like we heard earlier, it shouldn't be, this is EDI, this is STEM, this is our outputs. It should all be more organic. On the other hand, since it is not something that is addressed necessarily, obviously maybe something needs to be done. So I'm thinking, one of the things I was thinking at least about is, even though maybe it's not necessarily part of a research team or an institution or a funder, maybe make sure, for example, if you hire someone for that project, whatever was funded, for example, make sure that the ad is, the language is such that attracts as many people as possible. I was thinking this is perhaps something that could be done more practically. A couple more things, even though I don't know how easy they are or not, obviously, is try and, the team, whatever this is, if it is some project that now got funded or an existing team, make sure they're all on the same page in understanding what EDI is. Perhaps someone doesn't really understand, and so maybe make sure that they are trained in a way, but not feel that they're being, I guess, told things. It's just about creating awareness, I think, because part of making it natural, I think, is creating awareness as well. And the last thing, which I think is much more difficult, not that the other ones are easy, is, for example, it could be practicing in the like today, having events, make something that will create awareness through networking as well. I think that that's also important. Obviously, I'm aware all of these are not easy at all. And also they may not be part of a project's budget. So that's also, I think, a practical thing, but I'm just saying now, ideally, some ideas, I think, through which this could potentially be tackled.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So some practical strategies there around highlighting awareness of EDI, thinking about job advert language, pushing back to funding bodies to evaluate EDI if a statement's required at the funding stage, but also perhaps rewarding those who are working in this area, and that reward on projects in institutions to be the carrot and not always the stick kind of approach. Great. Okay. So I'll move on to some questions on collaboration and leadership, and then I think I'll open it to the floor. Just on leadership then, could we maybe have some thoughts on what role you think leadership needs to play in inclusive research culture, and who are those leaders? So maybe I'll go to Sam first.
Thank you, Sarah. I think I've been thinking about this one quite a lot compared to the other questions. I think leaders have a very key role in demonstrating the principles that we should be operating around. It's not just saying the words as well. It's doing the deeds. It's being inclusive. It's making sure that everybody has an equal voice, and everybody's voice is heard. Everybody, the right people are in the room. All of the wonderful things that everyone has been talking about today, in terms of how. So leaders have a key role in making sure that that happens, and I think that is important. So at the project that I lead, I try my best to get that done. Again, I'm not perfect. But that's what we want to be able to demonstrate, and that's what we want to have as part of what we're doing. And as Natalia said, it shouldn't just be this sort of, this is the EDI section of our meeting, and then the rest of it should actually be part of it, and it's just built into what we're doing. So I think that's the first thing. But then actually, we're all part of this. We should all feel empowered to be able to stand up and say, this is my voice, this person hasn't been heard, or I see that this person, you're doing something that we shouldn't be doing. So we should all have that responsibility, and if we feel empowered, to be able to actually bring that up. And so that leadership and that opportunity should also happen to everybody within a whole hierarchy, or however you want to call it, of a project or of a university even. And I think we should be able to own that, and we should be able to feel empowered and enabled to be able to do that.
Thanks, Sam. Anyone else want to add on this question here around leadership?
Yeah, I agree with Sam. I think that the position of the leader, in my opinion, is very important, because many people act as an example. So they see a leader, in whoever that is, as an example. And in my opinion, automatically sometimes it's as if that person or people set the tone. So if that person or people set that tone of, here, we're an open environment, we respect what people feel or their needs are, and if you have an issue, we can talk and arrange whatever your needs are, and make it work. And I think for that reason, in my opinion, it's very important. I also like the part of the question that was about who are those leaders. I think, in my opinion, that's dynamic. I don't think it's only the person that is called the principal investigator, or the project lead, or ex-lead, or something. Because, for example, it could be that I'm not the lead of a project, but I am chairing a meeting. I am leading at that second, but I'm not a project leader. And if I can see or sense in the room that a question was not as it should be in the tone, maybe it's my place to say, I'm sorry, can you please rephrase in a more respectful way? So I think it's dynamic, in my opinion, which is why I agree with what was said earlier. It's everyone's responsibility, and everyone at some point may be in that position without them realizing. So this is my take, at least.
Thank you. Well, we'll maybe move to questions from the floor. Do we have a roving mic at all? Yes. Okay, great. So we have plenty of time to take some questions from the room in terms of things you'd like to ask our panel members. We have a question at the front here.
Hi, excuse me, haven't spoken for a while. I was just wondering, in terms of promotions, it's something that I'm trying to get involved with in my own institution, is there anything in terms of the research positions? Is there something you would like to see removed or added to promotions as criteria? Because it's something that's quite difficult to get right. And I think it's a immediate place where it's easy to exclude people unintentionally.
Okay, great question, because it's really about that systemic or structural barrier. So the questions around anything we would change to the promotion process. Sam, you've been through that, as you mentioned, so maybe I could come to you first.
So yes, my first promotion application was rejected. I'm going to put that out. And it was because I was told that I hadn't had a PhD student complete and I hadn't put in my first grant. Nowhere in the promotion criteria did it say those two things. And in fact, one of my colleagues had just become a full professor without a PhD student completing. So I was told this about 3 days after COVID was done and it was my birthday. And you can imagine how happy I was at that point in time. So I think we need to have clear criteria of actually what's meant, because people interpret vague criteria in their own ways and their own biases, and they think about what happened in their career. I think the other thing is that we actually have such a variety of careers in academia. We have teaching fellows, we have research pathways, academic pathways, teaching pathways. We have different people doing different things and swapping between disciplines. No one pathway is the same, and no one academic does things in the same way. And so it's very difficult to say, well, by the time I was a senior lecturer, I had my first grant, I had 300K in the bank, and I had 2 PhD students complete. That it doesn't work like that anymore, and we can't do those things. In those days, you had, I don't know, DCPs coming out everywhere, and you could get things, and grants weren't 5% success rates. So I think we need to have very clear criteria for those promotion processes. We need to be very explicit in what we mean by that, and we need those reviewed against actually what the landscape is like, because the landscape is constantly changing. As I say, everything from teaching. One of the things in Bristol used to be you had to be a unit leader, but we've gone from 10 credit point units to 20 credit point units. So the chance of you becoming a unit leader when there's 50, 60 people in your school is much less. And so, and then you can't get promoted. So that wouldn't work. So you need to be able to make sure that these things aren't fixed in sand and fixed in people's minds, but actually dynamic and moving with the landscape. So I feel an imposter. I've always felt an imposter in academia, and the only reason I felt empowered to apply for promotion more recently is because I got a grant. I think if I hadn't got that, then I don't think I would have applied. But my grant doesn't make me any better for an academic than I was before. It just means that I brought the university some money. I'm not costing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something here, which is an experience that we've had in Durham, which is that the university decided a few years ago to try and address some of those problems. I'm not going to say it's a perfect solution, but one of the things that was done was to take out the requirement to apply for promotion. So nobody applies for promotion. Everybody's CV is examined every other year. And if the promotions committee spots someone who should be promoted, they'll put them forward for promotion. And that's really evened out the rate at which people get promoted in different groups. I mean, classically, very few women put themselves forward for promotion. So the number of women being promoted was really drastically changed. It's not a perfect system. There's still loads of problems with it, like some of the things you mentioned around, individual departmental committees having hidden criteria and so forth. But it does change it just lowers the barrier to some people for moving to promotion. So I think there are some, it was a complete overhaul of the system, and it means a load more work because you have to look at every CV every year. But on the other hand, it does have some benefits. So.
Okay, before we go to another one in the room, I'll maybe go to a question online, because we've got some questions online. Now, I can't see what order questions have come up in, so maybe you could help over.
Yep, that's fine. So Marvin, are you okay to say your question? Sorry, they should be able to hear you. So I'll just read it out. Sorry. So the question is, are there efforts aimed specifically at increasing the number of disabled academics? That's to the full panel. It didn't say specifically.
Okay, so maybe Marco, could you reflect on this first?
So I cannot name any specific project on the top of my head, but there are definitely some projects in this area. I think a few years ago, maybe it was the Royal Society that commissioned a report trying to understand a little bit better the experience and the barriers that disabled academics are facing. I think the EDI caucus has done some work around that, or they have supported projects looking, for example, at the physical spaces, because there are so many different ways people are disabled by environment and society. So I think this particular project was looking at lab spaces. And I know that the Royal Society of Chemistry has done some work on that as well, like particularly focused on accessibility. I think this is a very important topic to address, and often I think somehow maybe Stuart this morning, it was a very different kind of topic, but we saw like the impact of policy in a way, how our processes are designed can have some unintended consequences in a way if we are not engaging with the communities we are trying to serve, if those voices are not included in the process, and if we don't kind of review the outcomes of those processes as well. So it should be a kind of continuous conversation with disabled academics, trying to understand what are the needs and co-designing solutions together, I think. I'm not sure if I responded to the question, but I tried to address the topic more broadly.
Thank you. Thanks, Marco. Anyone else want to add? No.
Actually, somebody online also mentioned that the EDI Caucus Flexible Fund Project, DALE, Disability Access in Lab Environments, will publish a final result very soon as well.
That was exactly the one. Thank you to the person that mentioned.
Great. We'll maybe go to the room again and then come back online. There's one in the middle here.
Well, thank you for everything you said today, and I totally agree. But one thing I think is always left out is the people who support the research, like people like me, the professional services, or the technicians who don't get promotions, whose jobs may be regraded or they need to go for a new job, or are like me on EPSLC funded projects that stop and then there is no job or the next job to find. And working in EDI in Nottingham, I always find that obviously you drive the innovation, but to be truly inclusive, you have to think about the other job families as well, and they are often overlooked, like project managers who could maybe be co-eyes on grants because they bring a lot of expertise. And people who drive as project managers the EDI of your project and can really support you. What do you think needs to change?
Great, thanks for that question. So how do we ensure that when we're thinking about EDI in research culture, that we're thinking about all job families? So Sam, do you want to maybe start us off and then I'll go to Natalia?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and like I couldn't be here without the professional services staff that I have worked with in Bristol University, and also I'm going to look at Lindsay at Newcastle, Bath. I wouldn't be here, and I know that. And I think again, recognition. How do we recognize, and how do we how are we able to fund those people? How can universities, either very similar to sort of research staff on precarious contracts, how can we enable that to happen? But also, how can we get funding? So I tried to, for one of my proposals I've put in, I tried to get a named professional services staff on my proposal. I was not allowed to put that name on there. I had to then interview for that role. So that person had no guarantee. Once we got that project, they had no guarantee for the job, and I had to interview for that role as well. I'm not quite sure which system did not allow that, whether it was the university system, whether it was the funding system, but we employed the person that I wanted to put on there in the first place because they were the best person for the job. So why did I have to go through that process, and why did I have to do all of that to be able to? So I think the recognition that we have these amazing skills through our professional services colleagues, such as yourself, and that we're able to actually name them, as you say, as co-Is on bids, that we're able to put them in as named people and give that certainty for them as well as we go forwards. I think that would be, for me, that'd be really useful to be able to do. And I don't want to say it's empowering, because I don't think it is. I think having a permanent job with an open-ended contract and guarantee that you're going to be there will be much more empowering. But that initial step of recognition and that initial step of realizing that that's where it is. And I think alongside that, having more space in budgets and having more space in funders for that, I had to, for that same role, I had to cut down from 3 days or 3 or 4 days a week down to 1 day a week, because there just wasn't enough space in the budget to be able to do all the things that were supposed to be done. We managed to squeeze it out to 2 days a week now. But again, and I think Natalia and Marco were talking about, how do you fund EDI within your project, and how do you get that done? You can put that as a line item in a research bid. You can put that, but actually, it's really important. So, and surely you should be able to do the same thing, and put, getting the right professional services staff in. And so, if you want to do comms, if you want to do this, that, and the other, and having those lines in, and having space in that budget for that. So I think that sort of recognition for me is really important.
Natalia, did you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So yeah, actually, I'm so glad that you asked this question, because right before that, I was thinking of Lindsay as well, indeed, that's, for example, what we were talking about before, about disciplines. That's another discipline that actually gives into the project. And see, at least I will say, I didn't mention it actually. And there you go. So yes, I agree. This is something, for example, that, like Sam said, potentially could be an actual practical change in funding, perhaps, acknowledging the role of people that not only deliver the research, but also support it in the delivery. That's very important. And the other thing is, in my opinion, also the way that we understand the work of these people, to thank them on a daily basis, to acknowledge what they do is important. I'm not saying to over acknowledge, but to actually realize that on a daily basis. I think that's also important. So yeah, in my opinion, these are the aspects that I think are important from the project perspective, but also on a daily basis, the way we interact all together, that we are the team. It's not only the technical, if I can call them technical people, the team. It's beyond that, which is also about the inclusivity, that all of us are the team delivering something. Yeah, so thank you for asking the question.
Yeah, I would just add to that something we've looked at in previous projects that I've worked on is incorporating the technician staff on research papers for experimental work that they have been fundamental in the delivery of. And that is another mechanism by which we can recognise the very important contribution that all job families make to us being able to do research. But some really great points there around, the similarities of precarity that professional support and technical staff sometimes end up with when they're on fixed-term contracts allied to research, and making sure that we can actually name specific people who are ideal for the job on the proposals that we're writing. I'll go to online again. Is there another online question?
Yes, so there was a question on, let's see, what are some additional examples of how we can support early career researchers in overcoming barriers? And is there a clear pathway within higher educational settings?
So specific support for early career researchers to overcome barriers. And what was the second part?
And
Sorry.
is there a clear pathway within higher education settings?
Okay. Yes, I think this will need to be the last question. I'll go to Natalia first as a relatively early career researcher. So how might we support early career researchers to overcome barriers, and is there a clear pathway to do that within the higher education sector?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question to the person that asked that as well. So I think, in my opinion, from my perspective at least, some things that I think are very important is to actually value what they want to dare to do in their career. And for example, if I will talk about that in a minute, but I think that there are things that I wanted to do, and I did do them not only because I could deliver. So for example, do another job, lead a project, be seconded. That's what I mean. Do something bigger than what you maybe already know how to do, which is about the development of VCRs, which I understand is the question on. It's about not making them think it's a crazy idea, but I mean, unless it really is, but to actually support that and say, okay, yes, let's see, how can we do that? How can we allocate time for you to be a PI or a co-I or co-lead something? The other thing I think is also, because some people may be a bit more reluctant in understanding their values, and many people are actually. I think it's also about what we were saying earlier, the person that is their line manager or lead in the project they're in, maybe sharing with them opportunities, talk about these, say, okay, you know what, there's these opportunities, would you like to take part of it? Because it's also about, I think, that giving them the idea, and encouraging them that you can do this. And this falls even under the promotions that I think we were saying earlier, in my opinion. It could be that the early career researcher, the ECR, maybe they don't realize that they can get promoted, but maybe their line manager has seen beyond that. Encourage them, tell them, do you want to do that? This is what you need. I think you're on the threshold, maybe, but you can try. Worst case, they'll say no. That's all that can happen. And but the good thing is you could be promoted or whatever it is you want to do. So I think all these things, in my opinion, play a role. In an early career research is saying, yes, I will dare to do this, or I will be supported. I will try and go to the promotion, do whatever the application is for the project or whatever this is. I think it's that feeling that you have someone that is backing you. I think that's very important, in my opinion, at least.
Thanks, Natalia. Anything to add to that, Sam or Marco?
In particular, I really agree with what Natalia said, and we have been talking about, how the way people are treated day to day is very important. So this, of course, is very important. But I like the question brought in the pathway to the picture in a way, because sometimes the most meaningful support that you can offer, as Natalia was saying, is support that is actually mapped toward your career, like offering you the opportunity to lead a small grant, offering you the opportunity to maybe chair a panel or be on an advisory board. Don't assume, if you supervise early career researchers, don't assume that they know how to develop their career. So please open up these opportunities for them in ways that are going to be useful for them in their careers, that can be used, as Natalia was saying, for promotions, for example. If you're a professor, you know what is needed to be promoted in a certain institution. So tell early career people these are not secret. These should be information that we share across the board so that people know what they have to do.
Colleagues, thank you so much for listening to our panel today. It just remains for me to say thank you so much to our panel contributors, to our audience, to our people who asked questions. Thank you for engaging. It's been really useful, interesting, insightful, and I hope that through that we've got this new opportunity to reflect on what makes a thriving research culture that enables everybody to bring their whole self to work. Thank you.